Chapter 41 devotes 34 verses to the description of this sea creature. The length of the text already indicates its importance. God invested more words in Leviathan than in any other element of his response. There was something about this monster that Job needed to understand deeply. The questions began immediately. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? The divine irony was cutting. Fishermen capture fish with hooks and cords. Servants are hired through agreements. God asked if Job could apply these domestic methods to a creature that dominated the seas. The obvious answer created the necessary contrast. If thou canst not even fish for Leviathan, how dost thou intend to question him who created him? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Each question dismantled human arrogance. Not only could Job not capture Leviathan, but not even a full team of professional fishermen could succeed. The creature was neither a hunting trophy nor a commodity of trade. It was in another category of existence. Then came the most intense warning. Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. The text suggests that merely touching Leviathan meant a lost war. Whoever tried once would never repeat the experience. The simple sight of the creature was enough to cast down any warrior. No human being, however courageous, would dare to rouse him. And then God made the crucial theological connection. Who hath prevented me that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine. This phrase redefined the entire debate. Job's friends argued that God must reward righteousness with blessing. Job argued that God owed him explanations for his suffering. God responded that no one had given him anything first to create an obligation of retribution. He does not operate within the system of human debts. Everything belongs to him, including Leviathan, including Job, including suffering and glory. But the physical description still continued, becoming increasingly supernatural. I will not conceal his parts, nor his power, nor his comely proportion. Who can discover the face of his garment? Or who can come to him with his double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another, they stick together that they cannot be sundered. Think of the image. A natural armor so perfect that not even air could penetrate. Scales sealed like official documents, impossible to violate. If air could not pass, imagine swords, spears, or any human weapon. Leviathan was invulnerable by divine design, and then the description reaches dimensions that surpass any known animal. By his neesings a light doth shine, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. How to reconcile this with a crocodile or any natural reptile? The description refers to something draconic, a creature that breathes fire and transforms the environment around it with its breath. Leviathan was not just large, he was incandescent. His presence altered the normal laws of nature. In his neck remaineth strength, and sorrow is turned into joy before him. The flakes of his flesh are joined together. They are firm in themselves, they cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as a stone, yea, as hard as a piece of the nether millstone. A heart hard as a millstone. Muscles fused to one another, a neck where impossible strength dwelt. Leviathan was built not to be defeated. Every anatomical detail reinforced his invincibility. When he raiseth up himself, the mighty are afraid. By reason of breakings they purify themselves. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold, the spear, the dart, nor the habergeon. He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Slingstones are turned with him into stubble. Darts are counted as stubble. He laugheth at the shaking of a spear. Swords useless, spears irrelevant, arrows despised, sling stones like dry straw. All human military technology became a joke before Leviathan. The creature did not merely resist attacks, he laughed at them. The final details completed the picture of aquatic terror. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp-pointed things upon the mire. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh a path to shine after him. One would think the deep to be hoary. Leviathan transformed the sea into a boiling cauldron as he swam. He left a shining trail like poured ointment. He made the depths appear white with foam. His simple movement altered the entire marine ecosystem, and the divine conclusion regarding this creature was devastating. Upon earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. King over all the children of pride. This phrase connected Leviathan with the spiritual condition of those who exalt themselves. The most powerful creature of the seas served as a mirror for human arrogance. If not even Leviathan, with all his power, was outside of divine control, how much more the human beings who thought themselves capable of questioning the Creator? Some traditions interpreted Behemoth and Leviathan as symbols of primordial forces. In the ancient Near East, sea monsters often represented the chaos that gods needed to overcome to establish order. Ugaritic texts mention Lotan, a sea serpent associated with the churning sea. Babylonian texts speak of Tiamat, the goddess of aquatic chaos defeated by Marduk in creation. But the biblical narrative does something different. God does not present Leviathan as an enemy defeated in a cosmic battle. He presents him as a creature made by his own hands. There is no dualism here. There is no war between equal forces. The same God who molded the Garden of Eden also designed the monsters of the abyss. Both are part of the same created universe. This perspective completely transformed Job's question. If the apparent chaos of the seas and the brute force of the earth were integrated into the divine plan, perhaps the apparent chaos of suffering was as well. Not that God caused evil, but that even the most destructive forces did not escape his sovereignty. Job's response came in two stages. After the first round of divine questions about creation, he said, "Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further." It was the beginning of humble silence. The man who had demanded an audience with the Almighty now recognized he had no arguments. But God continued. The presentation of Behemoth and Leviathan came after this first surrender. It was as if the Creator wanted to deepen the lesson even further. It was not enough for Job to recognize his intellectual limits. He needed to visualize the scale of divine power through these monstrous creatures. Job's final response appears in chapter 42 and marks the conclusion of the entire discussion. "I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore have I uttered that I understood not, things too wonderful for me, which I knew not." Job received no explanation for his suffering. He obtained no justification for the death of his children. He did not get the verdict that formally cleared his conduct, but he achieved something greater: perspective. The vision of a universe so vast that his human categories of justice simply could not reach. And then came the most profound declaration of the entire narrative. "I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes." The transformation was complete. Job passed from theoretical knowledge to direct experience. Throughout his pious life, he had believed in God based on tradition, teaching, and the testimonies of others. Now, in the midst of the most extreme suffering, he saw. The encounter in the whirlwind brought no answers. It brought presence, and that was enough. Job's repentance was not a confession of hidden sins that justified his suffering. The friends were wrong about that. God himself would later confirm that Job had spoken correctly about him, unlike the three comforters. The repentance was of another nature. Job repented of having reduced God to his human categories, of having presumed he understood how the universe should function, of having demanded that the Creator justify himself according to human standards of justice. The epilogue of the narrative shows restoration. God rebuked Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar for not having spoken correctly. He commanded them to offer sacrifices and asked Job to pray for them. The irony was poignant. The accusers now depended on the intercession of the accused. Those who insisted on Job's sin needed his mediation to obtain forgiveness. And Job prayed for his friends. After all they had said, after every veiled accusation and every painful theory, he interceded for them. This act of grace marked the depth of his transformation. Suffering had not produced permanent bitterness. The encounter with God had generated the capacity to forgive. Material restoration also came. The Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses. The exact numbers matter. They represent not just recovery, but multiplication. What was lost returned twofold. But the children did not return twofold. Job received again 7 sons and 3 daughters, the same original number. Some interpreters see profound theology in this. Material goods can be doubled because they were destroyed. But the original children were not eternally lost. They awaited Job on the other side. Therefore, they did not need to be doubled. The family was complete in 2 dimensions. The 3 daughters received recorded names: Jemimah, Keziah, and Karen-Happuch. In all the land were no women found so fair, and Job gave them inheritance among their brethren. A significant cultural detail. Normally, women did not receive an inheritance when there were sons. Job broke the pattern, honoring his daughters in an exceptional manner. Job lived after this 140 years. He saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. He died, being old and full of days. The ending seems too simple after such a storm. But the simplicity carries its own message. Life continues. Suffering, however intense, does not have the last word. There is another side. Behemoth and Leviathan remain as permanent landmarks in the text. They are not zoological curiosities for academic debates. They are divine pedagogical instruments. Through them, God communicated truths that philosophical arguments would never reach. Behemoth represents the terrestrial dimension of mystery, the brute force that exists in the physical world, impossible to fully domesticate. Earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, the power of nature that humbles any human technology. God created this. It is part of the plan. It is neither an accident nor a design flaw. Leviathan represents the aquatic and chaotic dimension of the same mystery, the depths we cannot fathom, the seas we cannot control, the forces that seem threatening but also sustain life, the apparent chaos that actually operates within limits established by the Creator. Together, these creatures proclaim a single message. The universe is larger than you, more complex than your theories, more mysterious than your explanations, and it is all under control. Not your control, but under control. For Job, this revelation was sufficient. He did not emerge from the whirlwind with intellectual answers. He emerged with transformed faith, a faith that no longer depended on understanding everything, a faith that found rest in the presence, even when explanations were lacking. Job's response after seeing Behemoth and Leviathan was not revolt, it was silence. The same man who demanded an audience with the Almighty now places his hand over his mouth. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, he confesses, but now mine eye seeth thee. There was no explanation for the wounds. There was no justification for the dead children. What there was something greater, the presence. Job discovered that some questions do not need an answer. They need an encounter. Behemoth and Leviathan continue echoing through the centuries as permanent reminders. They tell us that the universe contains forces we will never domesticate, mysteries we will never decipher, depths we will never reach. And that is all right, because He who created the monsters also created you. And if He sustains the chaos of the seas and the brute force of the earth, He can sustain the storm that passes through your life now. To help us continue producing these documentaries and biblical stories, consider acquiring our ebook with more than 50 prayers. It is a way to bless this project and, at the same time, have a spiritual guide for your journey. The link to secure yours is in the description. Until the next video. Job demanded answers, and God answered with a whirlwind and 2 creatures that seem to have emerged from an ancestral nightmare. Behemoth and Leviathan do not appear by chance. They are part of a revelation that dismantles human pride and redefines suffering. Were they real animals, spiritual symbols, or something even deeper that few can comprehend? Today, you will dive into the most powerful divine response ever recorded. Subscribe and stay until the end, because the explanation completely changes the way many understand this dialogue with God. Before continuing with the video, do you want to strengthen your prayer life and also help our channel grow? I have prepared a material with more than 50 special prayers to guide you. Click the link in the description and help our project spread the word of Christ. Is there something that God created and cannot control? Among all the answers the Creator could give to a man destroyed by pain, he chooses to speak of two monsters. One that makes the earth tremble, another that turns the sea into a boiling cauldron. Behemoth and Leviathan. They are not metaphors, they are not poetic exaggerations. They are the creatures God uses to end the greatest debate on suffering ever recorded in the scriptures. And what they reveal goes far beyond what Job expected to hear. To understand the weight of this revelation, you must go back to the beginning. Job was no ordinary man. The biblical text describes him as the greatest among all the children of the East. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, a complete family, an immense fortune, an impeccable reputation. More important than all of this, he was upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Not out of convenience, but out of conviction. Job represented the perfect model of rewarded piety. Everything that traditional theology promised, he had. Then came the disaster. In a single day, messengers arrived bringing news that no human being should receive in sequence. Sabaeans attacked and took the oxen and donkeys, killing the servants. Fire fell from heaven and consumed the sheep along with the shepherds. Chaldeans stole the camels and murdered more workers. And the final blow, a strong wind struck the house where his 10 children were feasting. The building collapsed, no survivors. In a matter of hours, Job went from the most prosperous man in the region to a grieving father, a master of corpses, an owner of ashes. His reaction defies human logic. He rent his mantle, shaved his head, fell down upon the ground, and worshipped. His words echo through the millennia. "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. No accusation, no blasphemy." In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. But the test had not ended. A second wave of suffering struck his own body. Sore boils covered Job from the sole of his foot unto his crown. The man who once commanded hundreds of servants now sat among the ashes, using a potsherd to scrape the suppurating sores. His own wife, witness to all the destruction, suggested that he curse God and die at once. The temptation to end it all was there, offered by the one who should have supported him most. Job refused. 3 friends came from afar when they heard of the tragedy: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, respected men, known for their wisdom. When they saw Job from afar, they could hardly recognize him. The text says they lifted up their voice and wept, rent everyone his mantle, and sprinkled dust upon their heads. Then they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights. None spake a word unto him. The suffering was too great for speeches. Think of the scene, an entire week of silence. 4 men sitting among ashes, contemplating the ruin of a life. The friends likely expected Job to confess some hidden sin, some explanation that would justify such destruction. Job likely expected words of genuine comfort. Both would be disappointed. When the silence finally broke, the greatest debate on suffering ever recorded in ancient literature began. 35 chapters of arguments, veiled accusations, passionate defenses, and growing frustrations. Job's friends defended a simple theology: God rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. If Job was suffering like this, the logic was clear. There must be sin, perhaps hidden, perhaps forgotten, but it certainly existed. The equation could not fail. Job did not accept this explanation, not because he considered himself perfect, but because he knew his own history. He had been generous to orphans and widows. He had not coveted gold nor trusted in riches. He treated his servants with justice. He did not rejoice at the misfortune of enemies. The catalog of integrity that Job presents in chapter 31 is impressive. He challenged any accuser to point out where he had failed. But no one could, and that was precisely the problem. If Job was innocent, how to explain such suffering? The theology of the friends did not accommodate this possibility. For them, the universe functioned like a precise moral machine. Goodness generates blessing, wickedness generates a curse. Job was breaking the system. His existence challenged everything they believed. The debates grew more intense. Eliphaz began gently, suggesting that perhaps Job should seek God with humility. In the following rounds, his accusations became direct. Bildad insisted on divine justice, arguing that Job's children might have sinned and therefore died. Zophar went so far as to say that God was being merciful, for Job deserved even greater punishment. With each cycle of speeches, the distance between Job and his friends increased. Consider the loneliness of this man. He lost family, fortune, health, and now the understanding of his own friends. The people who came to comfort him became accusers. Every attempt at defense was interpreted as pride. Every declaration of innocence as stubbornness. Job was completely isolated in his pain, but he did not retreat. In the midst of the debates, Job did something extraordinary. He demanded an audience with God. Not to deny his faith, but to understand it. He wanted to look into the eyes of the Creator and ask directly, why? The text records his cry in chapter 23. "Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments." Job wanted a trial. He was willing to present his case, defend his integrity, and question divine decisions. This audacity frightened his friends. How did a man covered in sores dare to challenge the Almighty? But Job understood something they did not. His faith did not depend on easy answers. He preferred to face God with his questions than to accept false explanations that protected a comfortable theology. The chapters accumulated, 29, 30, 31. Job made his final speech, a complete defense of his life, ending with a direct challenge. "Let the Almighty answer me. Let my adversary write an indictment. I would carry it on my shoulders like a crown." Then an unexpected fourth character emerged. Elihu, a young man who had remained silent out of respect for his elders, exploded in 6 chapters of discourse. He criticized both Job and the 3 friends. He tried to offer a different perspective on suffering as divine discipline. His words had elements of truth, but they still did not reach the heart of the matter. And after Elihu finished, it finally happened. 37 chapters of human debate, accusations, defenses, theological theories, cries of pain, attempts at explanation. And then, out of the whirlwind, God answered. The storm that formed was not natural. It was a theophany, a divine manifestation in the form of a vortex. The Creator of the universe descended to speak with a man covered in sores sitting among ashes. The first sentence already established the tone. "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge?" It was not a condemnation of Job specifically, but a reminder of the distance between human perspective and divine wisdom. God did not begin by offering explanations. He began by asking questions. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who hath determined the measures thereof? Who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy." Observe what is happening. Job wanted answers about his personal suffering. God responds with questions about the cosmic creation. The strategy seems strange at first glance. A man asks for an explanation for his pain, and God speaks of the foundations of the earth and singing stars. But divine logic operates on another level. The questions continued in a cascade. "Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? Or hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof?" God led Job through a cosmic journey that encompassed heavens, seas, light, darkness, snow, hail, lightning, rain, ice, stars, clouds. The intention was not to humiliate, it was to reveal perspective. Job was trapped in a specific question: why do I suffer if I am innocent? God broadened the horizon to show that the universe contains dimensions that the human mind simply cannot hold. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Canst thou send lightnings that they may go, and say unto thee, Here we are? Each question was a silent reminder. You were not there. You do not know how it works. You do not control these processes. And if you do not understand even the basic mechanisms of physical creation, how do you intend to judge the moral designs of the one who created them? God then moved to the animal kingdom. He spoke of the lioness hunting prey for her whelps, of the ravens crying for food, of the wild goats giving birth on inaccessible cliffs, of the wild ass that scorns the city and the crying of the driver, of the wild ox that refuses to serve man, of the ostrich that flaps her wings proudly but leaves her eggs in the sand, of the war horse that trembles not before the sword, of the hawk that flies south by divine wisdom, of the eagle that makes her nest on high and from there spies her prey. The message was becoming clear. The world does not revolve around human understanding. There are processes, creatures, dynamics, and purposes that function perfectly without any human being understanding or participating. If God sustains this entire complex system without needing human consultants, perhaps he can also manage Job's suffering without owing explanations. But the climax was yet to come. After traversing heavens, seas, and wild animals, God presented two creatures that resembled nothing Job knew. They were not gentle metaphors. They were demonstrations of absolute power. Behemoth and Leviathan, the monster of the land and the monster of the sea. The 40th chapter of Job introduces Behemoth. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. This small phrase carries immense weight. God did not say that Behemoth existed independently. He said he had created it along with Job. The same hand that formed the righteous man of the land of Uz also molded this monstrous creature. Both were part of the same project. The physical description is impressive. Behemoth eateth grass as an ox, but his strength is in his loins. His force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His limbs are like bars of iron. Scale this. Bones compared to tubes of bronze, limbs like bars of iron, a tail that compares to a cedar, a tree that could reach 40 meters in height. This was no ordinary creature. Behemoth represented the brute force of creation in its maximum manifestation. The text continues, revealing details. Behemoth is the chief of the ways of God. He lieth under the shady trees, in the covert of the reed and fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadow. The willows of the brook compass him about. Behold, he drinketh up a river, and hasteth not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan into his mouth. Some scholars have tried to identify Behemoth with known animals. The hippopotamus is the most common association, given the aquatic habitat and the described strength. Others suggest the elephant, due to the reference to massive bones and imposing stature. But the biblical description seems to transcend any specific animal. A tail like a cedar? No hippopotamus or elephant possesses such a characteristic. Behemoth may represent a category of its own, the personification of untamable terrestrial force. God's implicit question was direct. Can you capture him? Can you take him in his sight? Can you bore his nose through with a snare? Job knew his answer before even formulating it. No, impossible. That creature was beyond any human capacity for control. But if Behemoth was impressive, Leviathan was terrifying.